So one thing I just wanted to make sure everyone knew about, hopefully you've seen by now that the KL2 and the K-12 Building Interdisciplinary Research Careers in Women's Health announcements were both released last week. Both applications are due in March 1st. One thing that's really important that I hope that if you're interested in either one or both of these opportunities, that you take advantage of the grant writing workshop. There's two of them, November 29th and December 6th. These are great workshops. I think that it's fair to say there was a positive correlation between the people who go to these workshops and those that get funded afterwards. That's not attested, that's just my anecdotal sort of take on things, but I highly encourage anyone who thinks they even might be remotely interested in either of these to go to one of these. They'll be led by, I think, Janet Gross, many of you know, and has come to our K-Clubs in the past, so valuable that is. Right. Is the up here, Barbara? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start out today. Can we turn those lights on? Yeah. Everyone see the screen okay? Okay. All right, so today is we have a facilitator and esteemed panel to present to you the alphabet soup of submitting your grant application. So we'll get to that in a minute. A couple of housekeeping things I wanted to mention is we just talked about the ACTSI KL2 and Birch 12 and K-Tutorial. Is this separate? I didn't know this slide was on here. Is this K-Tutorial different than the one that we just talked about, I guess? So this one is open to anyone who's doing, I think, just the application. So there's sort of two. K-Tutorial is November 21st and 28th, and then if you're specifically interested in the KL2 and the Birch is the other one I mentioned. So promise, we'll always do the survey from the people who responded to the drawing for the people who responded to the survey from the prior month. We want to really encourage you to give us your feedback via the survey that will be distributed after today's K-Club. We're also putting together some focus groups to learn more about what people want to get from K-Club and hopefully track towards that so that we can compete for some extramural funding. And so we thank those of you who said that they'd be willing and interested in participating in our focus groups, so please respond to the survey and let us know if you're interested. So of the people who responded to last month's survey, we're going to be drawing for the limited edition K-Club mug, a very coveted item here. And our facilitator is going to do the drawing for us. Next here, it's Shastis Chonat. I totally butchered
That's why I gave it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will let this person. Oh, actually, how do you say your name?
It's Shastis Chonat.
Oh, Shastis. Okay. That was a tongue twister. Well, here you go. Congratulations, and thank you for responding to our survey. Okay. So after last month's K-Club, we referred to the fact that this fall we're following a spectrum of activities, and somebody responded to the survey and said, hey, can you please orient us where we are in this spectrum? So we hear you and we're accommodating. So back in September, we talked about preparing to apply. Then last month, we talked about formatting and writing, and you remember if you were here, Janet Gross actually presented that one. Today we're going to be talking about the actual submission process and what that looks like from our internal perspective. And finally, in December, we're going to be talking about after submission. Once you get reviews back, what do they mean? What do you do? How do you handle it? And we're going to have another panel along those lines. So today, I'm just going to briefly introduce our facilitator. Kimberly is the Assistant Director of the RAS in the School of Public Health. Lois Fussell here in the first seat, the Manager of the Pre-Award Research Administration Services in School of Public Health. Kimby Hagan is Assistant Professor and also is the Administrative Director of CFAR?
That's Shelley Bryant. You're not able to...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But,
I'm the Assistant Director of CFAR, run our development.
Okay, can you all put your microphones on, please? And so if anyone can't hear, please raise a hand because we are WebExing this. Dr. Pam Winterberg, right here, is Assistant Professor in Nephrology, and she recently submitted a K-08, so she has that perspective. And then there on the end is Andrew West, who has kindly as of an hour and a half ago in my SOS call, agreed to fill in for Shelley Bryant. And I feel like Andrew's perspective is really important on this panel. He is the Senior Director of ACTSI. Did I get that right? Okay, so he's the big wig in ACTSI. He's the administrative partner of currently David Stevens, who's the PI. It's a huge grant that has so many different moving parts, and they recently went through their renewal, or I guess it was a new application technically. Is that right? And there's just so none of you will probably be putting in an application at that magnitude, but I think lessons learned and how you carefully orchestrate a large grant submission, that can easily be scaled down to a smaller grant submission. So I think that his perspective will be really important here as well. As always, I invite you to ask questions. We want this to be interactive. And with that, I will turn it over to our facilitator.
Before we start, how many in the room have submitted an application before? Okay, so we know to hear the topic still. So, like Stacy had said, we are going to walk you through the process here at Emory so that you understand all the steps, who's who in the process, and kind of what to expect from a systems perspective. And along the way, we're going to incorporate our panelists regarding their experiences, their relationships with the individuals, the offices along the way. So obviously, when you look at this, Emory is a world acronym. In this bowl of soup is everything we're going to refer to and sure you understand. And what I want to focus on is the terminology.
I'm just going to get rid of it a little back here.
Oh, gotcha.
There you go.
The some steps and responsibilities, the timeline, and then routing logistics. So you've identified your program announcement, and you have this great idea. So what's your next steps? Now what do you do? Who do you work with? Who do you contact? We are going to go through the terminologies first, and then I'm going to kind of turn it over to the panelists. Really, when we talk about a submission with the academic institution, there's three primary players to help you get this submission through. One, the PI, which is you. We have the RAS. Has everyone heard of the RAS here at Emory? It's Research Administrative Services Offices. Each school has a RAS. The School of Medicine has multiple RASs. Within those RASs, you have a pre-award team and you have a post-award team. These relationships are key when you think about the RAS and the Office of Sponsored Programs. The Office of Sponsored Programs is actually going to be the one who does final review and submits and see that you're responding to. The RAS, they're going to help with the preparation, budget, the development of your proposal within the agency guidelines to get a final format for you. And then OSP is going to do final review and submissions. I guess enough on the RAS and OSP really are your friends, and we're your resource to help you get this through the process. So I think it's really important to build on those relationships. So what I'm going to ask before I go through kind of the rest of the acronyms is for the panelists to kind of talk about the importance of these resources and how you interact and build those relationships with OSP, the RAS, and your PI.
Okay, I'll talk about it from the pre-award management side. So, School of Public Health School of Nursing has a team of 12. And what I tell them all the time is that we have a job because y'all are committing to it. And our job is to help you succeed. And the only way that we can do that is to cement that relationship. So that means you start with an initial meeting. And during the meeting, we're going to ask y'all a lot of questions, and some of them may seem silly to you, but we also have to think about on the post-award side, if you get the award, is the budget we created going to cause any problems for them? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with you in depth about the RFA that you're applying for. Are there restrictions that you need to know about and be aware of it? We do rely on y'all who have read the RFA as well. That helps. We also have checklists for y'all. kind of how we start. Then we go from there. And we'll get into that a little bit later when we actually start the routing part of it.
I Stacey and I submitted my first KOE in February, and I actually just resubmitted it last week. I'm going to think short deadline because of EPAC going down. But I would say, kind of mirror from a PI perspective, that I had a lot of help from my RAS person. The first go around was even more involved, and I didn't know what to do. Like, it was just eye-opening. I didn't realize how many things I had to put together for the submission. And so it was helpful just to me to make sure that we were all on the same page. There's not a lot that you have to do for the budget sort of pay because it's mostly salary, your own salary. But I thought it was very helpful. It listed all 30 documents or whatever I needed to put together. The other thing I found very helpful going back and forth to my RAS person was drilling into the minutiae about some of the instructions for each attachment. You know, one only needs 30 lines. It's not real, it's lines. And so I was caught off guard with that, and the bibliography. I had an et al. In one of my statements and things like that. So they're like the expert of putting the whole, I guess, the proposal together and for you. And so it was very helpful to have an expert at hand to help me find and make sure everything is up and up.
Speaking from the project officer perspective, as I mentioned in my introduction, I run our developmental core at the Center for Race Research with internal funding versus the external NIH funding. But we see it as a training ground for helping people prepare to submit NIH applications. And so we require that our applicants use the exact same form set as if they were applying for an NIH R03 application and follow all the exact same rules, all the way up to the point where they do not submit it to OSP. They send it to me, but all the way up to that step. And we had applications we received last week, and it really brought home to me how important that the relationship that develops between an applicant and a RAS unit really is, because I had two applicants who submitted who had worked very closely with their RAS unit. And the application that they submitted to me, I did a technical check to make sure that if I had been in my agent, would I have, is your best here? You don't want to listen to my brain? For this dramatic design. Okay. The two applicants have been working very closely with their RAS unit, had taken the RFA, which is an internal one, so it's not precisely exactly like NIH. We had some additional materials that we required and that had to be included. And it shows. I did the technical. Perfect. Just perfect. Two of the other applicants, one of them, because we're internal, I was able to give a zero. One applicant, in addition to having attached to the application a copy of the letter of intent, which they had also included a month before and should not be included in the NIH application. And also, we had given them an opportunity to have a panel of people review their draft, pick it apart, and look for everything that reviewers might have an issue with. Then had attached the written summary, basically laying out everything that a review panel might want to look for weeks, which is not something you want to send to NIH. So, and when I went back, it turns out that this person and another one who had a slightly, had also had problems with attaching things in the wrong places, not have as far as a working relationship with their RAS unit. And so, if anything brought it as sharp a leak as that. Had those applications actually gone to NIH rather than to me, I think the two of them would have a very strong chance of being funded, and the other two would have been returned without review. And they had put the exact same amount of time for independent and science. So, work.
Great. Thanks, Kimby. Andrew?
We submitted our renewal application this year, and it was over 4,000 pages listing $6 million. We didn't have a RAS, so we put an OSP and did meet OSP representative early on, but still ended up submitting the application with about a minute and a half to spare. So it was pretty difficult. You know, you can never be too organized. I don't care what size of application you're only asking for $20,000. Being organized, starting early, things up. I've got just a lesson learned that collected from my cards at other institutions around the country, which I'm happy to share with the group, which I think will probably be relevant for any application submission. And some of it's common sense, but sometimes you be reminded of things like being organized, having a project manager, you know, assigning tasks to individuals, but also getting external reviewers, getting outsider perspective. You can recruit a professional grant writer, have somebody do illustrations for you, and fit in the right people, work together. But try to do it yourself. You're going to fail. So you've got to really assemble a team and have somebody who's managing the whole thing, who's perfectly a type-A personality. Go to their office and see if their office is disorganized, you don't want that person to be managing the application.
Great. For those of you who have application, have you worked with your RAS during your submission process? Yeah. And you know how to find contact information? And how did it go?
It went great. Actually, I'm a pretty detail-oriented person, and my pre-award specialist was also very detail-oriented, so she even caught things that I missed, appreciated a bit.
Great.
So, Andrew, would you be willing to send that list of lessons learned to us so we could distribute it to the group?
Sure.
Okay.
So as you can see in listening to everyone, that not only is the RAS important, but so is the relationship with OSP. I mean, those are going to be the ones that help facilitate and answer the questions that you have. I really can't say it enough. Use them as a resource. That is what they are there for. Love doing what they do. They're all more than willing to go above and beyond what you need to have done. So I kind of go down through the list. So EPICS, and I'm going to touch on these briefly. The university uses two different systems when you're submitting. One, we have Compass, which is the university's financial system, which is where EPICS comes from. So that is where the university keeps your budget, your budget justification, and that's where they store, one, that you submitted, and two, that we have all the signatures in place for your submission. So that's their internal tracking of your submission. And then you have Cayuse, and I think this is more focused on federal funding. So typically when you have that, the university has a system called Cayuse, which talks directly with grants.gov. It's a systems-to-system software program. Instead of doing those manual form Adobe packets that we used to do, we now have a system that's going to upload your packet into Commons. Obviously, grants.gov, that's the interface between Cayuse and Commons. The PA, that's your program announcement. I think maybe Lois had talked about the program announcement. Somebody did.
I did in the RFP. It's either going to be a PA or an RFP.
I think it's important for everyone to read the program announcement. That includes the PI, the RAS. If you have a coordinator, maybe someone on the panel can speak to the importance of reading that RFA from cover to cover. Typically, the things that we see, what is not the case.
Yeah, well, sort of summarize what I was just saying, is that every RFA, even within the NIH system, is going to be identical. And so it's not a good idea to assume that your grad unit person or anyone who's assisting you with the application development is going to be familiar with the unit of your particular one. The problem I just described earlier came up because the person who was a PI had not read the RFA really, really clearly, had not handed a copy of it to to the resident person they're working with. And so the person uploaded what they were handed, instead the TI was aware of it. If they had gone over the RFA together, I think that the mistakes that occurred would not have. So read it again, and then, I don't know, read it again. And we normally will go ahead and highlight, after we've read the RFA, we will actually highlight and tab it, so that when we have our first meeting with you, we can tab it what we're talking about.
Check for dates too, depending on the funding opportunity announcement. They may update from time to time, so don't assume that it's going to be the same months and months on end. Also, a lot of times there's going to be FAQs posted on the website, and sometimes the FAQs really are insightful, and they tell a lot more information than you would ever get from the RFA alone. And call the person who's listed, call the program officer, and you may be able to somehow gather more information just by talking. Some of them are real close to the vest, as they probably should be, because they're giving everybody an advantage, but sometimes you can really learn something by calling the people up directly. And I would, frankly, call my counterparts in some other institutions and say, how do you guys interpret this? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, up to 7 or 8 different institutions, and we don't have the same read, and that kind of told us what we needed to know. So, you know, I'm saying is don't be completely dependent on the RFA. Obviously, you've got your responses to that, but there are other ways to get additional clues to pull this all together.
I know what we're saying about the making sure you have the research. The RFA will have a revision date on it. So before you turn it in, just do a most recent download and look and see whether the version you just downloaded has the exact same date as the one you've been using. It probably will, but it'll check your mind.
And even for Ks, if you don't think change from year to year, they're a fee. I just think one kind of quickly is eliminated for my resubmission. They changed the SOA number from my initial submission to the resubmission. And then I would also just add to that to make sure that you have the most recent instructions for applying, because those also update every once in a while. It's a really big update in January.
And I would add also, if there are FAQs, share them with your pre-award person you're working with. We had a proposal in that was to the CDC, and there were some FAQs that they didn't let us know about. And I spent 45 minutes on the phone with OSP because there should have been IDC included according to the FAQs, but it was not in the RFA. Air cost rate, sorry.
Yeah.
Make sure you share that information. The more communication you have between your RAS team, it just makes it go smoother.
It very much is a shared responsibility when you're talking about RFA, developing the checklist and timeline, which we're going to get into here shortly. So continuing down the list, the ECOI, this is your conflict of interest. Emory University requires every time you submit, a conflict of interest is on file. That will actually be handled by your RAS and a link created and sent out. RAP, we use this, your uses this one to manage workload, but to also know that you're submitting. So I would encourage everyone, even if you have a thought that you want to submit, put the red cap in, because this is going to tell them, hey, you're thinking about submitting. And you always come back and say, I don't have enough data, I changed my mind, I'm going to submit later, but at least they know that you're in the queue and they can work with you to start the planning process. And have the, you know, it's kind of a start for if you decide to submit later, but I would encourage you to do this sooner than later. What we try to avoid so that we have enough planning time is that, you know, NIH due dates, you know what those due dates are, so as soon as you think you're going to submit, go ahead and put them in. As you grow through your career and you get some of these tighter round times for the RFAs, you know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we can work around those. But if we can put the ones that are consistent, that's great for everyone involved. P eligibility for anyone new submitting, we can start this process as soon as possible. So ask the university to set you up on all the systems. So we need to get you into Epics, we need to get you into Cayuse. So the RAS can work with you on getting this PI eligibility form completed and to ensure we have access to those systems even before you decide to submit. I mean, obviously you guys are in here for a reason and you're planning to submit in the future, so I would say sooner the better to get those things in place, as well as your ERA Commons, which is need in place to be able to submit to NIH. So we have that set up along with your established roles. Anybody have questions so far on the submission process, or those of you who have started, do you have questions for the panelists? No. So we are going to then jump to submission steps and responsibilities. I've tried to outline, and what I want to say is CASs are fairly consistent on how they handle the process, but from my perspective, I'm speaking for the School of Public Health and Nursing. I would say that if you decide to submit, reach out to your RAS to ensure that the same responsibilities are in place. The process might be a little bit different. I see Diane from PEAS is in here, so she can always speak for PEAS. Setting RADCAP, that's the role of the PI. The Commons ID, and I don't really necessarily have to read through each of these. The eligibility form gives you access to Epics and Cayuse. Once we know that you're going to submit, what you're going to see from the RAS is you're going to see us reach out to you and to planning meeting, which will identify roles and responsibilities, and it'll also try to outline a timeline. And we're going to talk about timelines later with the panelists. We'll develop the budget and tie that back to your budget justification. We're going to route your ECOI for you right away for all of your key personnel, your mentors. The science documents obviously are the responsibility of the PI. We will take those and convert them to PDF and get them in the final format for submission for you. Epics, we everything into Epics, and what will typically happen is we need a budget justification, your abstract, and what you will see is you're going to get a link to go in and start the routing process for signatures. Cayuse, that's the system to get it into NIH format. We will take care of all of that for you and then send a PDF for you to review. Now that could be some differences in the RASs. Some people, PIs, have access to Cayuse and do that in the School of Public Health. But finally, do a final school review. We'll go through everything one more time, raise up any concerns that we have, and they'll let Office of Sponsored Programs know that your submission is ready to be finally reviewed and submitted. And then once it's up in Commons, you have the ability as a PI to go in and review the application in its final format. Now, when we talk about timelines, this is where it gets important because you don't have a 2-day window any longer that NIH used to give us. So if we submit on the day it's due, really you have limited time to do a final review. So it's going to be important when we talk about timelines. As far as roles, okay.
So are you saying that once it goes up to Commons and it's outside Emory and the NIH, that there's an opportunity to pull it back before the deadline?
Yes. Typically, now that I've only been here 4 months, so this is getting to the Emory way versus where I was. But I would, we always let the PI know it's out there to go out, encourage them to go out into the Commons and to let us know if there's anything wrong. And look, can actually we just pulled them down because of the, the Epics cut off. The member found something wrong. We pulled it down and resubmitted it.
Did it go all the way through the review process again?
No. No. We basically would just copy the proposal, make the change, and then resubmit it to NIH. So just that in mind, it does provide you the opportunity to do a final look before it gets pushed along in the system.
Well, and you also get a copy of the Cayuse file. So the board team will send you a copy of the Cayuse file and ask you to respond back with an email saying that it is final and ready for submission, and that's how we let OSP know it's ready. There are sometimes, not often, but there are times where there is an issue, a version conversion issue from Cayuse to grants.gov. And we had one that got in at 49 and 15 seconds. And then because when it was airing out in comments, if I could figure out where the error was, it took OSP, our resident OSP, one of the associate directors, and Holly Summers, for us to figure out that what it was is there was a subcontract on it, and in the sub-budget, the budget they had put cents, and rounding up to the nearest dollar. It turned out, and we got it in just the next time. And we'll find out. Caillou said it was fine. So that's why, again, the timelines are important.
So if the panel could kind of talk about what steps in the process do you find time-consuming, and where should the applicants focus their kind of time and energy?
I think we're all focused on the science documents. You have to get beyond that. Like I said, there's all these other documents you have to prepare. And I think once you have the first one, you've done it the first time, like when it is the pre-submission, it's much easier. There's all the equipment needs and the institutional environment and your training and responsible project completion, on and on. But again, I thought that's where the checklist was very helpful. So I would take pauses from my 12-page research energy and go and work on some of those other pieces. I think mostly, I really felt like the pre-award process was very helpful in moving all the other things along, right? So I could focus really on the research and some of these other attachments. It's not on here, but she gathered our support from all my mentors as well. And so great about that. And the resubmission, most of my were, she was working on counting them instead of me counting them.
The Center for Research, like CSI, just had to submit their renewal for 5 more years. And we were one of these continuing situations in which we had started really early. In January, we had our first meeting. Right, yeah. So we completed everything, and we turned it over for upload and Cayuse. And Cayuse is giving us an error message that it had to go all the way up to Holly Summers, had to be on the telephone for 12 hours over the course of one day, because the application kept, the error message we got back, that we hadn't included a clinical protocol. Well, we hadn't included a clinical protocol because we were not, in fact, doing a clinical study. And we did not check the box for clinical study. But it checked itself and would not uncheck, no matter what anyone at Emory did. And it took the Cayuse vendor going and doing a software patch. They then had to send to Emory so that we could uncheck that box saying we were doing a clinical study, so that we stopped being asked for a clinical protocol, so that we could send it to grants.gov. It's not allowed, if we had not sent it to Emory in time to allow 2 full days of work, fix an error message we hadn't even created the deadline. The happy story that we didn't. The unhappy story is that a PI, a fairly large grant that Emory has now lost, because they ran out of time. 6 hours. And this is the grant.gov deadline. So the dramatic stories that you've been hearing about getting these things turned in at 4:59 and 15 seconds, sometimes they get turned in at 5:01 and 20 seconds, and that's too late. So, don't let that be you. Every out chunk of mail because of the grant got turned in a little bit late.
Requisitions are a curse and a blessing at the same time for that reason. I think when we submitted our renewal application, it was like 1,400 pages, and here's a bit of what it looked like. But this time it was well over 4,000 pages, and if we hadn't had the electronic submission system, I don't know if we could have pulled it together. So it's really helpful, but like y'all say, stuff is going to go wrong. So when you're doing your timeline planning, and you begin back planning, I would absolutely absolutely do that, where you basically say, our internal deadline is going to be 2 or 3 days before the actual deadline.
You're generous.
We're actually going to talk about timelines next. So it's a good
I
phase-in.
mean, Murphy's Law will apply to these electronic submissions, actually.
And so I'll just jump into the timeline. So most guys are pretty consistent as to when they want things done. At the School of Public Health and Nursing, if there's a School of Medicine or any other school on the proposal, it has stayed en route 15 days beforehand. In fact, if you have School of Medicine, Yerkes College, and the business school on it, it has to go through, all of those co-investigators have to certify it. Then it has to go to the various departments, who normally toss 1 or 2 more people into it. Then it has to go to each of the schools to be approved, and we have to get it back to the School of Public Health. So for us, we're the last one that signs off on it, and we don't sign off on it until the PI tells us it's ready. I don't know, Joanne, what's y'all, that deadline for proposal route? 3 weeks, yeah. And
That's PEDS, right?
that's key. You know, so we want to be kind of consistent. It's just School of Public Health on it. We will give our PIs 8 days and before we take them around it. So encourage them to make sure that meet the 5-day deadline. OSP really wants to have it 5 days before it's due. And some of the war scores that we've heard is one of the reasons why. Because they can give it a full review. They're going to look at everything. They're going to look at the budget. They're going to look at the budget justification. They're going to compare them. They're going to look at the body sketches to see whether or not the PID numbers are in there. Are there any at all in there? So they're looking at the entire proposal. So when you get down to between 3 and 5 days, the review is smaller. And when you come to the last day, they can improve. They're just looking at how you see if there's any errors, and if there's not, they're getting approved. The last submission was what, 70, how many last time submission date we had?
The October 5th submission deadline, OSP had 67 routed the day before it was due or the day it was due. So, and I think when they're talking about these, I don't think the intent is to scare anyone. I think the intent is to and understand that the more you plan and develop your timeline, the ultimate outcome for you is better because you're getting a better review, you're having time to review it in its final format with the agency if it's NIH. And to clarify what Liz is talking about, when she talks about routing, she's talking about epics. So, and PEDS can correct me if I'm wrong for them, but when we're talking about the School of Public Health in 8 days, we want to route epics, which means we don't need your full proposal, but we do need your budget justification, your abstract. And then we can still continue to work on your CAIUS in hopes to get it over to OSP 5 days ahead of time. I mean, that's our ultimate goal. Diane?
And I would add that it's important to remember, too, that OSP will not start peer review unless they have everything, because they can't review it to a certain point and put it aside, because with as much volume that have for Emory as a whole, there's no way they can put it aside and go back to it when another piece comes because they lose track. So the whole package, everything has to be there before they'll start looking.
And so those that are kind of online with us, Diane was pointing out that OSP needs the entire packet in order to do final review. So for the panel, can you kind of discuss how you collaborate with the other schools and how that ties into your timelines and how you work with your admin directors or your program directors on developing your timeline related to the science and hitting kind of the administrative timeline?
Not applicable. So far, yes.
You're still working with multiple mentors. You had to get their bio sketches. You had to
Fortunately, we're all in the same school,
Right.
all School of Medicine, with slightly different departments, but again, like I said, that was where it was helpful with my 3 awards route description. They was the each of mentors, admins that needed to get, or their route people, get the other support.
When we going to the C farm, and it is exactly the same as I tell all of the PIs who work through our developmental courses and internal funding, is the advice that we get is work the term deadline, add time, add a little more extra for, I don't know, the vendor has a software issue that you can't control a problem, and then figure out when you absolutely positively have to have all of the science pieces from the various people, and look at them in the eye, cross your fingers, put them behind your back, and give them the wrong deadline. Really do name one, say, I'm not going to get funded if I don't have this stuff back by April 20th, but I need it from you the 18th. It has to go on the 20th. When it really has to go on the paper, lie through those teams. Just do it, because you're going to get busy. You're going to have another problem, but it's your application that ends up suffering. So just because you've established a timeline doesn't mean it has to be the timeline you tell anybody else. You have 2 sets of books. Yeah.
See, so we worked across multiple schools here at Emory, but our applications with Morehouse School of Medicine, Georgia Tech, UGA, from children, so we had to work across multiple institutions as well. We do have, when you have a timeline and the deadlines for different pieces of it, and you start small, maybe you're asking for specific aims for different components to begin with. But you learn about how people operate. You've got problem children who can't meet deadlines, then you know about that early on. And then you might have to adjust based on their inability to follow a timeline.
It really does happen. I would also say that too, like with the mentors from Elizabeth Cave, right, we're very reliant on our mentors, and some of them go out of town, and they're like the least you're global is due. What happened to me?
You also learn about, when you get their product, you can see if it's well thought out and well done, or if it's garbage. Then you know it's time for an intervention with those individuals, where you're going to have to basically get other people involved to help them out. So, you know, asking for work products along the way, rather than expecting it all to come in at the last minute, is a smart move as well.
I'll say from the RAS standpoint, interacting with the other RAS units is actually fairly easy. So if we know that we have got a faculty member or PI that's in another school, we will normally loop in the pre-manager for that RAS unit so that they are aware of it, because we don't always know. And then we're able to build that relationship. We have now for, we were one of the pilot RAS units. And so we've been able to build those relationships, but we also have built them with OSP. And one of the things, especially if you're working on your first grant and you're having your mentors read it over, or you're asking a more senior faculty member to just look at it for you to make sure you haven't missed anything. If you just submit it, we don't have to OSP submit it early. If you just go, listen, it's final, I don't want to think about it anymore, ask them to submit it, and they will. But that's because we've built that relationship. And we'll make a note in the EPIC routing that the PI wants to go early, or we'll even call it OSP and ask them. But it's a very important relationship between OSP, the RAS, and the PI. And you're here to help you succeed. We're not here to be the naysayers or to put up red.
So I'm a little bit about routing logistics, which we kind of already talked about. Other things to point out, which I did not mention when I talked about EPICS. I do talk about that being kind of the internal tracking of your submission. I mean, we understand the pressure the faculty are under to submit and get grant funding. I mean, that's how you get permanent tenure. There's usually evaluations, expectations set, and with IH, this is never going to happen, but just think further down your career when you get submissions and you don't necessarily need an institutional signature authority. If you're not in EPICS with that submission, then that submission from a university standpoint does not count. So, you know, kind of just keep that in mind. I think, because we kind of talked about these steps, so I think what I want to do is, one, see if Andrew has any, lessons learned that he thinks would pertain to the topic to discuss, and kind of talk about the benefits of routing early, but if you have some things from your list that you shut us down, put them on the spot.
I'll send this so that everybody can kind of review over it, decide whether or not it's your situation or not. But the bigger the grant application, the more organized you have to be. I will say that if you can get an internal person, somebody you really trust, a CFAC member, to review the application and offer criticism, I think that's really helpful. Because sometimes, what you come up with you think is wonderful, and but you need somebody who can be brutally honest with you and tell you sense, or you need to go about this differently. So having that kind of external review, I think, really helped us. But I've got some other tips that would be helpful. I got to go.
Oh, yeah.
I'll share this with you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for coming at the last minute. We appreciate it.
And I will also say that one of the things, because I've been at Emory for 21 years, so one of the things that I will say that I love about ethics is that we all know where the proposal is in the routing process. So, again, RAS unit into it, we're able to look at it, and we can reach out to the RAS unit and say, hey, it's been stuck here, so-and-so hasn't certified or approved it, can you please ask them to do something? So we're always able to interact with them, and so your proposal doesn't get stuck, because the school public health, we have a lot of PIs that will go out of the country.
Ditto that. So benefits to routing early, we've kind of talked about these, but if completed, you're going to get a detailed review by both your RAS and OSP. Some of the is kind of duplication, but that's more chance of catching anything if anything needs to be caught. Your system generation of your final packet to do a final review, and like I said, you can pull that down if something's not correct, both in CAUSE and in Commons. So I kind of wanted to turn it over to the PIs who have submitted to kind of talk about, was anything discovered that made significant impact for your application, or kind of some of your success stories? And there's other people in here that could share.
I would not underscore, like, earlier is much better. So my resubmission, I was forced to submit it earlier because of the system change, and I was much better experience. And one is actually that we don't think about it, but the final review in Commons, yes, look at your packet, but what's important, especially for a K, is that you have to have all these letters of reference. And for both my submissions, even though I was detail-oriented and had everything done, I had problems with the letters of reference from my release attached to my grant. And so having all that done early, so you're not worrying about putting your CAUSE packet together, and you're focusing on that. I had to address both times, getting my letters of reference attached to the grant before the deadline as well. And then, we picked up a few things the first time around. I think there was an issue with my letters of reference, or my references cited, that I regenerate at the last minute in my application manager to get it to knock it off and not put any at all on it. And there was a last minute scare about the full page limit, because at the time my development plan was split into three individual sections, and then there was the remaining 12 pages for the research plan. And even though my PDF, I fit in 12 pages, it kept sending an error that it was over 12 pages, and so we were trying to figure out, is it really over 12 pages or not? And then this time, too, one of my last times, it was helpful to have a few extra days, because everything's great in Word, but when we turned it into a PDF, my figures got messed up, or a table got messed up, and so having the extra time to fix those details, which are important, it was less stressful. So
some of the K awardees that I've worked with, the common one was that they would research plan and they would have the references, like on the last page. And then in the electronic submission, those are actually located as a separate document in a different place. So that when the application packet is all put together, bizarrely, the references come before, they appear before the research plan. And so if you keep them as like an extra page of your research plan, they're there, but they don't show up in the packet where the reviewers are expecting them to be. And it may come off as if you had neglected to include any reference. A small problem that could have, fortunate implications. So this day, it gets to work in your resume again. They're going to notice if you don't include references. But they need to be familiar with your RFA to know that this one should have, science grant has it. If it hasn't, it has happened, and don't take it.
Have questions? Is there something?
I know you do.
I know. Okay.
I have a question for Pamela. So back to the timeline, so did you actually, you may not timeline, how detailed was it? Did you take steps working through the timeline?
This time around, to repeat the question, how detailed was the timeline and how did I incorporate the checklist into it? We were pretty early for the K. I think I had reached out to Emory maybe in December for a February submission, and I ended up submitting pretty much the same science, but detailed iterations of it for 2 prior grants between December and February. So I did an internal, the URC grant, and American Heart grant in January, and then the K was in February. So that was the last year, but it forced me to get the science done about a month before it was due, and so it let me really refine it that last month and focus on all the other things, the career development plan, and those different attachments about the university and things like that, and your training, full research, complex research, which they're important, but they're time-consuming. They're not fun to put all those things together. So I tried just to take that checklist and figure out which day this day I'm going to work on these, and this day I'm going to work on these. But I didn't stick to it 100%. The mission, again, I think glad I had actually buffered a little more time into it because I ended up having to submit it almost a week early because of the sponsor difference. The blessing in disguise that actually forced me to get everything done even earlier than I expected.
Along those lines, and this kind of goes on our time management case club that we had recently, like, did you?
I block off time on my calendar, yes, because
Shut your door?
yes. I would work from home certain days, and so I wasn't getting customers. So yeah, I tried to, this time I was coding charts. This time I was working on these particular documents. Yeah, anyway, I cut my animal.
And that is exactly the same advice that the faculty that we work with. Is do science piece and then set it down and then start working on your abstracts, your facilities and equipment, making sure that you've got all of the right format for the mental bias sketches and that they've done their form that'll right. Because by the time you have all those in place, a fair amount of time, a big chunk of time has passed since the last time you looked at the science, and I guarantee you will see things you haven't seen. So if you try to work on all these sort of at the same time, you're going to lose the benefit of having your science piece just sit completely ignored for a fair amount of time. When you're actually blocking out on your calendar, working from the submission deadline with the rest, of course, block out what you're going to work on when, do the science first, then the other pieces, and then back to the science.
I felt that made it daunting for me because seeing the list of all the things I had to put together, if I had it on my calendar, this is what I'm focusing on today, I didn't have to decide that day what I'm going to run today. Right? I tried to
Anyone else have their hand up? No? Have anything else they want to share?
I don't know where to sign up for the webcast, because I always come forgetting. I marked it.
I know Patrick was intent to submit forms, so then.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Right.
Right, but it's not like a, right, how do you find it? Make sure you know how to find it. And do it, I always do it earlier than you think you need to. And I've done it at least twice where I've done and not submitted the grant, right?
And I think that's fine.
Yeah, our pre-award administrator, in Patrick, our pre-award administrators have it on their signature block.
Right, I think
Like, you know,
the only one who has not switched to it yet is nursing, and we're working on that, so, everyone else is up, so.
Let's add one other thing for people who are submitting, in, basically at your division directors, you know, that you're planning to, really good about doing that as well, but also just helps to put the email, I'm saying this is the deadline, one or two sentences about it, because oftentimes they're going to have to approve it when it gets routed, and if they have no idea what's going on, it can create some delays. So it's a time where you want to really let everybody know what you're planning to do, even if you end up not submitting it to that time. So
I say too, it was helpful, again, for K, you should know months in advance that you're planning to submit, and talking to my division director was very helpful, because we also, I did 2 weekend calls the first few leading up to the deadline, right? And he understood why my charts were, you know, a little more 7 days behind. So you definitely have an open communication with people. Also, again, to help support you and make sure that they don't delay things, because they also travel outside the country.
also tell your family members that you're planning to. Yep, so that they know why you're in a bad mood.
While you're working weekends.
It can be stressful. Again, like I said, we're here to help, so, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your resources. So. Pre-proposal, is that what?
Okay, pre-proposal, so would you just submit something to an agency to see if they want to fund it, or to see if they're going to ask you to apply?
Some of the agencies, they need.
Letter of intent?
Letter of intent is attached to the proposal, right.
Yeah, but they need. They have.
Right. Well,
The only thing is going to have a deadline, and it will be written in. Those agencies, those funders that require a letter of intent or pre-proposal, combination of those, have that deadline in there.
I'll answer this for public health, and if it's different for PEDS, they can speak up. I would say if it's a letter of intent and you have not been accepted yet to submit, I would say no, we wouldn't do a red cap or submit anything to OSP. PEDS is shaking their head too. So at that time, you don't need to. So once they come back and tell you, yes, you got the go-ahead, then you could put the red cap in. You're in to submit. So, great question. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.